right, everybody, welcome back to the channel. So I picked up a while back a pretty interesting amp, and it's a Denon, and this thing's probably from early 90s. Turns out this amp dates back to 1989 and actually retailed for $570. So a big shout out to Big D Wiz for providing me with this information, man. That guy's great. And it's a 5-channel amp. So this is something that wasn't really common back then. But being a 5-channel amp, this thing's kind of interesting. So if you look at it, it says it's a 3-5-channel dual power supply amplifier. And it says non-switching Class A circuit. So what does all this mean? We find out later in the video, so keep watching. I'm not sure what this non-NFB means. So this thing's got kind of a crazy design to it. So we're gonna look inside this thing, and we got some wires that we gotta be careful of. LEDs on the top. So I have never seen an amp with as much stuff going on inside as this amplifier does, and it's actually divided. There's 2 discrete boards in this thing. Looks like we've got a 2 different power supplies. And so what I'm thinking is this is probably the power supply for like the 4-channel, and this is a separate one for the subwoofer output on this thing for the 5th channel. And man, there is just a ton of stuff going on in this thing. I would just hate to have to work on this. This thing has just got pieces galore. And it says it's a non-switching, so I'm going to kind of look into this thing and figure out what it is. But the problem that this thing has, as you can see on the RCAs, is it's missing the ground terminal on like half of these things. And I think some of these ones that are on here just kind of slide on and off. And so when I went to test this thing, I didn't have any output on some of the channels and stuff. And so when I noticed when I pulled out the RCAs, when I went to take this thing off the bench, that those things were stuck to my RCAs, and that kind of sucked. So anyways, I'm gonna play around with this thing because this thing looks really interesting, and you know, I'm not sure what the story is on it. I'm not sure if this is just a full Class A design, which would be kind of interesting. I don't know if that's good, bad, or indifferent, but you know what? Let's dig into this thing and see what we can come up with. All right, so before I try to replace the RCA inputs, which I think might not be all that hard to do, the bottom of this board, of this amp, which usually these things are mounted the other way. Usually all the components are facing down. These ones are facing up. I think I can just take a bunch of screws out and this whole bottom comes off. And so I think if I need to replace that, I think I can easily do it. But what I'm going to try to do is I had another one of these that was, some of them were damaged. And so I was able to take the grounding part out, and they look very similar. So I'm going to try to replace these things and see if that's going to get it to work. All right, we got the DCA-3500 Denon on the bench, and I want to show you guys something. So since this thing has 2 power supplies, it's literally like 2 separate amps inside of this thing, right? So what we've got are 2 power inputs, 2 grounds, and we don't necessarily have 2 remotes, but essentially we do. Apparently it wants a remote turn on from your head unit and an accessory key hot, okay? So this amplifier, we can do a couple of things. We can run the subwoofer off of one of the inputs from the high pass. So if there's a problem with that, we can actually run the subwoofer off of a different input. It does have a crossover, high and low pass. It's not variable, but it's pretty cool. Apparently the high pass is 18 dBs, low pass is 12 dB, this is pretty cool stuff for, you know, we're talking early 90s here. Okay. And so right now we've got the subwoofer hooked up, and this is weird how this kind of complicated how this thing is. It is bridgeable, and we can actually run this in a 3 subwoofer bridged mode, I believe. And so apparently these are the left channels, both front and rear. These are the right channels, both front and rear. So right now we are using the front channels, which we have an input on, and the subwoofer, which we have an input on, and we're going to try to, we want the woofer to be on external. Apparently that switch looks like it's stuck, so I'm not sure what we'll do about that. And go over a little bit of the specs on this thing real quick. I was able to find them. So they rate this amp 2 different ways. They rate it at 1% THD, and then they rate it at 0.05 THD, okay? So the 1% at 1 kilohertz is really kind of the standard, okay? So it's 40 watts times 4, subwoofers 80 times 1, okay? I'm assuming that 80 watts is probably a similar sub to the other channels, and it can only be run at 4 ohms. I'm assuming the 40 watt channels could probably be run at 2 ohms because they do have a rating of 80 by 2 bridged. So what I'm assuming is that subwoofer channel is the same as the front channels for the most part, as far as transistors and everything. And it's just bridged already, okay? So it's already running in 2 ohms, but it's bridged to 4, okay? And then it gives you the lower distortion at 28 watts times 4 and 60. But this is the 1% is more of the universal. So if you want to take a look at these. So one thing that I need to point out is this top lid, this thing is like beef, like seriously, it weighs like 5 pounds. I'm assuming that these most likely are the output transistors for possibly the subwoofer. I haven't dissected this thing yet, but this is the heat sink for here. And so anyways, I'm gonna go through, I'm gonna try to look at what the transistors and stuff are on this thing and kind of dissect this thing. And then we're gonna dyno this thing. I mean, I'm just curious to see what an old relic like this thing does. So anyways, let's take a look at the transistors, and maybe I'll try to diagram the layout of how this thing works. So this is the board. This is showing 2 channels, the subwoofer and the right front. And as you can see, they're both identical with identical transistors and ceramic resistors on each channel. So what we've got here is a list of components. As you can see in the power supply, the big power supply has 4 transistors, and these are BJTs, not MOSFETs. So it's got the D1065s, and on the output side, we've got SK transistors, and we've got NPN and PNP transistors, and those are also BJTs, and they are identical for all 5 channels in this amplifier. So to determine if this thing was truly a Class A amplifier, I employed the help of somebody that knows way more than I do. And in the true definition of a Class A amplifier, this amplifier is not. He analyzed the circuitry and determined that it was not. That it is just kind of a typical Class AB, and it may be biased to a little bit more Class A at lower voltage input voltage. But you know, this is pretty typical for Class AB amplifiers to do this. So yeah, this was pretty much just a gimmick to sell these amps, albeit it is a good sounding amp. So anyways, let's fire this thing up. Let's see what it does. All right. We got power, battery power. What we don't have is the top on it and the light, but I just heard it click. So let's see if we've got any type of input on this thing. We do, we've got some sound. What we don't have is subwoofer. All right, so I've got the Denon DCM-3500 hooked up. And right now we're just running 2 stereo speakers and 1 subwoofer. And I thought there was a way I could wire this thing, because you can bridge all the outputs on this thing, but somehow only the right channels get bridged to one and the left channels get bridged to one. So I wasn't able to bridge another channel to run stereo along with the subwoofer, because the subwoofer channel is already a channel that's bridged. So I was hoping to run 2 subwoofers and stereo, but I can't do that. So, but I'm really impressed with the power output, which we're gonna dyno this thing in a minute. And you know, this thing's pretty cool, and I've been listening to it with a lot of different music and stuff. So let's give it a listen. All right, so we've got this thing on the dyno, and this is going to be the most brutal test for this thing. We have all the channels driven, but all the channels are driven in bridge mode. So we have it set up as a 3-channel amplifier. And so we're going to do 4 ohms bridged, which we could divide by 2 pretty much to get our 2 ohm rating. So we're going to test it at 13.6 volts at 4 ohms, all channels driven. Let's see what this thing does. Looks like we got 59 watts. So maybe we'll play around with some voltages and see what we can come up with. All right, we're gonna reset this thing. We're gonna try it at 14.2 volts. Let's see if we can do any better. Looks like we got 66 watts. All right, so now we're going to try this thing dynamic burst. Let's see what this thing will do. Looks like we got 85 watts. So I'm going to play around with this thing. Let's see what this thing will do. 4 ohm stereo. Keep in mind, these were bridged. All right, so we're going to move the loads to the dyno to one of the stereo channels, and we're going to see what it makes. 4 ohms stereo, all channels loaded. Looks like we got 36 watts. So while it might seem a little disappointing on the power output of this thing, I didn't realize till I took this thing apart that I was literally running this thing on like 12 or 14 gauge wire for the power and the ground. So I'm pretty sure that contributed to the lousy output of this thing. So unfortunately, I had it all taken apart and wasn't able to try it again. So while this thing didn't seem to make rated power, I really think the problem was me, and I apologize for that. You know, going down to powering this thing off of this really isn't enough. So I'm gonna give it a pass. You know, this amp, for being as old as it is, this thing is in perfect condition, and it performed flawlessly. And you know, I think figuring out how to fix the inputs on it, they all worked good. Everything worked fine as intended. I will say that one of the problems I had, and I didn't put in the video, was I had problems with this switch. It wouldn't move, and it was frozen up. So I unscrewed it, and the switch moved. Well, somebody put the wrong screws in here, and the screws literally locked the switch from moving in place. But anyways, this thing's a beauty. If anybody's interested in it, let me know. I'm not sure if this is something that I want to keep or what I want to do with it, but I also have its little baby brother. Maybe it's its sister. I don't know. But anyways, I tested this amp. It's from 1991, and it made 12 watts at 4 ohms. And yeah, so, and if I recall, I could not get this thing open to even look inside of it. I was gonna make a video on it. I don't remember if I did or not. But anyways, thanks for watching. If you guys get a chance, pick up one of our channel stickers. Make sure you like, subscribe, leave some comments, man. But I'm telling you, this really is a piece of history that is really worth having around and talking about. So we'll catch you next time. Thanks.